All right, good morning, everyone. It's certainly wonderful to be inside today. I call to order this regular meeting of council for Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. And in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I want to acknowledge that we're gathered in the heart of Treaty 7 territory of Southern Alberta. This land is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Siksika, Kainai, and Pikanai First Nations. Also, the Tsuut'ina First Nation and our most adjacent Indigenous neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki First Nations. Further, we are located within the Rocky View Métis District within the Battle River Territory. The town of Canmore is committed to working to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation as we acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. Turning now to the agenda, are there any changes? Seeing none, I move approval of the agenda for the February 4th, 2025 regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now turning to the minutes of January 7th, 2025 regular meeting. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I move approval of the minutes of January 7th, 2025 regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And on to the business today. We've got under G, bylaw approval. Number 1 is removing tourist homes as a use in various land use districts. Mr. Schneider, welcome to council.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the 3 hearings that we're going to be, or 3 agenda items that we're going to be hearing today. I will be presenting the first one, which is related to tourist homes. Ms. Annika Drost, our Senior Development Planner, is going to present number 2, which is related to Palliser and CCH. And Jenica Collette, who is one of our development planners, is going to present the agenda item with respect to Steep Creeks. So for the first item, that's bylaws 2025-02, 03, and 04. And as I said before, this deals with the removal of tourist homes as a use within a number of specific land use districts within the town. This is the background that comes forward. There was a council motion that requested that staff remove tourist homes as a use from the land use bylaw. And this is related to the many things that are going on with the housing action plan. And the goal of this is basically to ensure that we have a stable and affordable stock of rental housing. Tourist homes are still going to be allowed to operate as existing non-conforming uses following the removal of this from the land use bylaw, and I'm going to get back to this with a more fulsome explanation of what non-conforming means. So bylaw 2025-02 and 03 are really more housekeeping in nature, and they're related to the Bow Valley Trail Area Redevelopment Plan, and bylaw 03 is the Teepee Town Area Redevelopment Plan. Both of these statutory plans have reference to tourist homes, so basically what we're going to be doing is just striking out the reference to the tourist homes within both of those. So these are the sections that are affected by within the Bow Valley Trail Plan, and these are the sections that are affected by within the Teepee Town Area Redevelopment Plan. Now, getting to bylaw 04, which really is the heart of the matter. These are the land use districts that you can, up on the screen, that will be affected at this point. So they're basically land use districts within the valley bottom part of the community, but they also extend out into the Bow Valley Trail area, where the Bow Valley Trail Central and General districts as well. At this point, we are not proposing to look at the districts within the three resort greenfield development areas. So that would be Spring Creek Mountain Village, Silvertip, and Three Sisters Mountain Village. And as noted on the screen and in the staff report, that will require a more fulsome discussion with the area developers to see what they want to do and how they want to handle this, because tourist homes are an integral part of how they do their marketing and how they do their development as well. So we're going to leave that for now, but we are going to get back to the three developers in the near future. So, as I said, when if council chooses to pursue these bylaws, the uses are stricken from the land use bylaw, and the existing uses become what's called non-conforming uses. There is an informal term that's often used for these uses, but that term doesn't really carry legal weight. So we, in the planning department, we avoid using that term. The non-conforming uses are governed within the Municipal Government Act, and basically what it says is things are allowed to, if they're approved and legal, they're allowed to remain to operate as it is, provided that the building footprint of the operation doesn't expand, and provided that the use is continuous. So the Municipal Government Act stipulates that if a use is discontinued over a 6-month period, that the use is canceled and they lose their non-conforming status. Now, this presents a slightly interesting, I wouldn't call it a conundrum, but with the fact that people have been signing declarations to convert their tourist homes to a residential tax bracket, and we've been issuing, as of the December council meeting, we've been issuing certificates of conformance confirming that they're now a residential use and not a commercial use. That particular section wouldn't necessarily apply, because once the certificate of conformance is issued, the tourist home use is canceled anyway. So someone couldn't use that as a backdoor way to try and get their residential use back as a tourist home. So we feel that we've got this area covered with their certificate of conformance. There's also a note within the MGA that says if a property is destroyed if a building is destroyed more than 70% by fire, it can't be rebuilt to the existing non-conforming use.
Mr. Snyder, I want to ask a question, if I may, about the previous point you made about their tax status. I'm wondering if there's a conflation of different things here. I thought that the only way that a tourist home can get residential status is actually do a zoning change.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I thought the only way that a tourist home could get residential status now was actually to formally change their zoning to residential.
No, that's if a residential use is residential uses are listed within the land use bylaw for each of these zones, and there is a corresponding residential use. Unless I'm missing your question here.
Yeah, so tourist homes should always be taxed at the tourist home rate.
Correct.
You can live in your tourist home.
Correct.
And so even if you live in it 100% of the time, you're still taxed as a tourist home unless you formally change it to residential. But that's not through the tax declaration. You have to. Ms. Smithers?
So if you choose to convert your tourist home to a residential use, you would submit the application that would go to change the tax structure from commercial to residential. And as a part of that process, we also require you to switch to go through the change of use, or as Mr. Schneider's talked about, the conformance document to change your use to residential. So it's not a rezoning because both uses are allowed in the district. It's acknowledging that you're giving up your tourist home status and you're now a residential use as well as being taxed at the residential rate. So it's two processes that are linked together.
Okay, so, but when we're talking about changing their tax status, we're not talking about the primary resident declaration.
No.
No, okay. All right, so you're actually going through a process that is through the planning department, not going on your annual declaration.
You're declaring for the purpose of your taxes that you're a residential use and not a commercial use. And as a part of that, you're also going through the conformance step with planning and development so that your allowed use is residential.
I think we need to be clear, though, that there's a planning process first that then results in a change in your tax classification. You're not actually applying to change your tax application. You're applying, or you're getting a use that results in a tax application, because I think we're confusing things here. The way that this reads, it could be that you accidentally lose your tourist home status if you declare that you're living in it primarily.
The way that it's set up now, you have the stat deck that differentiates between the tourist use and the residential use. The way that the process is currently working to enable people to move into that residential tax class is that's the trigger to push them into the conformance check on the planning side. So we can certainly work to make sure that that is clear for people that are owners and want to move from one class to another, but that's the way the current process is set up.
So just want to make sure we're talking the same language here. It's not through the annual declaration, so that's
Correct.
great. And we no longer have a personal use declaration to put us into a residential, which would have had directly with tax status. It's a planning process, though, that gets the person into a residential use that consequently means that they are in a different tax category.
So the default tax class for a tourist home is commercial.
Yes.
If a landowner comes to the town and says, but I'm not operating a tourist home, I shouldn't be taxed as commercial, I'm residential, we will change that, and as part of that process on the tax side, we're also issuing that conformance check that moves them into residential on the land use side. So the two processes are linked together.
Okay. And so they are aware that they're converting their tourist home to residential.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just thinking that the way that the system's set up, the tax follows the use.
They have to approach the town.
And so I just want to make sure that we're clear
Yeah.
that, okay, so they're approaching on for taxes because that's what they see.
Yeah.
But from the town's perspective, they're changing their use and that results in a different tax treatment.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, so that, I just wanted to make sure. So that's why it's confusing when I say an applicant cannot move to change their tax status. Because where they're focusing on the tax status.
Here, I think that the significance of the bullet that Mr. Schneider has up on the screen is the switching back, right? They can't come in and say, I want to be taxed at a commercial rate or at a residential rate because I'm not a tourist home.
Yeah.
And then come back a year later or 5 months later and say, actually, I want to be a tourist home because they have given that up.
Yeah, and that was explained on a previous slide, I think, more clearly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Councillor Graham?
What does it mean to not use your tourist home for 6 months as a commercial property?
If it was, if we had a way of monitoring it to note that they weren't taking guests, or if they were, I suppose, if they were out of the country. This
So,
is the
Ms. Smithers?
Yeah, it's kind of a moot point, given the conversation that we just went through, right? Because if you're not gonna be a tourist home for 6 months, you will have given up that status. And then
So-
it's not a use and you can't go back to it.
So if for 10 months if the original intent of a tourist home was I could go to France for a month a year and rent out my property, correct? Like that was the original intent. So now if I do that, if I live in my place for 10 months a year and go to Europe for 2 months, have I just lost my commercial ability?
You remain as a commercial property and pay the commercial tax rate, and you remain as a tourist home.
Yeah, because you can live in it. This is a type of use that actually can't time out like that because it's actually allowed to live in it. So
Right.
what you described, they would keep their tourist home
They
status.
keep their status there, okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure, because
Yeah.
it sounds to me like I'm not using it as a commercial entity
Yeah.
for 10 months of the year and I would lose it after 6, but that's not the case.
In other types of uses, if you're no longer using it for 6 months, you're using it something other than what's approved, you could lose that status, but you can live in a tourist home, so you don't lose it.
So you don't lose it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just
Yeah,
wanna make sure.
thank you. Thank you for entertaining those questions.
Oh, no, not
Please
a problem,
proceed.
Mr. Mayor. So continuing, these are the affected districts within, within the downtown and immediate environs, within Bow Valley Trail and Teepee Town. We did do a mail out to the existing tourist home operators, and the feedback up until now it's been generally neutral. The tourist home operators want to ensure that they're still going to be allowed to operate through this, and as we've discussed, they will. I think there were some former tourist home operators that are now residential that were also caught in that mail out, and they want to make sure that this isn't going to make their taxes go up, and that's a completely separate process from what we're here to talk about today. So our recommendation is that all 3 bylaws receive first reading, and that council schedule a public hearing to hear all 3 bylaws at once on March the 4th, which is the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking to council to see if there are any other questions. I'm seeing Councillor Faubert.
I just had wanted some more clarity around non-conforming uses. And if a tourist home is not being rented out, does that mean it's not being used as a tourist home, or does that just mean that it's a vacant tourist home that hasn't been rented out?
It just means it's still a tourist home, it just doesn't happen to be occupied at the moment.
Okay, and so like the change would really be a real change to a residential use, not just that it hasn't been used for a while.
Right.
Okay, cool. Because that kind of I know it felt a little weedy in there, but it was an area where I felt that there could possibly be some confusion, and I wanted to make sure I understood it, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
If it's still being classed as a tourist home, as far as we're concerned, it's a tourist home.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Oh, Ms. Smithers?
I just wanted to flag this slide. The recommendation, the last recommendation on the slide shows the public hearing for March 4th. What we've proposed and is in the council report is March 11th for the public hearing.
Oh, yes, and so is it,
March 11th is.
March
the
11th is
date.
correct.
Okay, my mistake, I'm sorry.
okay, all right.
It's all.
Thank you for catching that. And so we'll go with the date that's in the package. Thank you. Okay, and thank you very much, Mr. Schneider. All right, then I will move the council give first reading to the Bow Valley Trail Area Redevelopment Plan Bylaw Amendment 2025-02, removal of tourist homes. In speaking to the motion, as Mr. Schneider pointed out, a lot of this is housekeeping in nature to give effect to that which we've already decided to do. And now will take its place in these ARPs and tourist homes. So I'm speaking to all of them, but so I certainly support this motion. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give first reading to the TP Town Area Redevelopment Plan Bylaw Amendment 2025-03, removal of tourist homes. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give first reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2025-04, removal of tourist homes. Anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll move the council schedule a single public hearing for bylaws 2025-02, 2025-03, and 2025-04 on March 11th, 2025. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Excellent, thank you. We'll now move to item G2. Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing Direct Control District Bylaw Amendment 2024-37. Ms. Drost, welcome to council.
Good morning.
All right.
Sorry, this cursor is moving a lot faster. Nope.
If you open it up on the laptop and you play it, it should go to the projector.
If you go to like view slideshow right from your laptop, it might pop up.
Yeah. Under the PowerPoint, not good.
Well, it's also be time because I see speech.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. All right, now we can get started. Good morning, Mayor, members of council, anyone joining us today. My name is Annika Drest. I'm a senior development planner with the town, and I'm here to present Bylaw 2024-37, which is an amendment proposal to the Palliser Lane Perpetually Affordable Housing Direct Control District. And for anyone following along in the agenda package, it starts on page 142 for this item. So the subject site is located at 100 Palliser Lane, which is identified in blue on the slide. It is adjacent from the existing Blackiston and Hector building to the north and Highway 1 to the south. So this DC district was passed by council in May 2024. And then late last year, Canmore Community Housing, which is the landowner for this property, has done some more detailed design work for a housing project that is being proposed and has identified the need for some changes to the district to allow for more efficient site design as well as to allow for more flexibility on the exterior building design. And because this district doesn't allow for the development authority to grant variances to the provisions within the district, it has to be a land use amendment, which is why we're here today.
Councilor Green, do you have?
Yeah, I've got a large echo that I'm having a really hard time hearing all of a sudden.
Closer. Okay, let's try
Test,
that.
test.
That sounds better. Yeah. Okay. So there's 3 amendments proposed. The first one is to section 1443(6), which is the rear yard setback requirements. So right now the setback is required to be at 12 meters from the rear yard, which is along Palliser Trail, and the proposal is to change that distance to 0.0 meter. And the 12-meter rear yard setback was initially incorporated to ensure a 12-meter landscaping buffer was added to the section of the parcel that runs parallel to Highway 1. And I've shown that section in the dashed blue square on the slide, and that is the section that was specifically intended to have the 12-meter rear yard setback. The other sections along Palliser Trail weren't really identified to require that, but it was included in the DC district by the landowner. And the landowner has since determined that in order to take advantage of the site configuration, a 0-meter buffer is more advantageous to allow more efficient building placement on the property and move additional building to the southeast property, or southeast of the property. Administration has no concerns with this amendment, as it acknowledges the site restrictions due to the unique parcel shape and accommodates more of the development within that southeast portion of the site. And the 12-meter buffer parallel to the highway is still maintained and secured through a different provision that already exists in the DC district that speaks directly to a 12-meter landscape buffer. The second amendment is to allow more flexibility to grant variances to Section 11, which is our community architectural and urban design standards. So the landowner has identified that in order to meet the sustainability targets outlined in the area structure plan, some flexibility is required to the architectural design requirements to design a sustainable building that can meet the intent of the district, which is to develop those long-term affordable housing units. An example that the landowner brought up was the step-back requirements. So in our bylaw under Section 11, we require that the facade steps back in certain places along the building frontage, just to have a bit of articulation and create more interest. So in this case, the landowner stated that in order to maintain higher energy efficiency without compromising the intent of achieving affordable housing, and reducing the number of units proposed, a flush facade would be more beneficial to meet the end goal of creating and maintaining the affordability of those units that are being proposed. Administration has no concerns with this amendment and finds that there is a need to provide some flexibility to the building design to support the reduction of ongoing maintenance and operating costs to achieve long-term affordability. And the amendment still ensures that the sustainability targets that are noted within the ASP, as well as within sections of the DC district, are being met. And we're still looking at the wording on section 1443(7)(2) at the bottom of the slide here. So it still talks about providing the variance, but not compromising the architectural integrity of the building. So there's still some discretion that has to be exercised to ensure that the building still meets our overall mountain character aesthetics. And then lastly, the third amendment is just an administrative amendment, and that's moving the electric vehicle charger requirement from the variance heading to the design headings. So that was just misplaced at the beginning. And the content of that section remains the same. In terms of stakeholder engagement, there was a mail out done, and it's our standard courtesy mail out to area residents. We received one response back from the Blackiston building, from their condo board, And some of the concerns noted were the proximity to the development to the Blackiston with the setback change, the height concerns, impacts of shadows on views, and parking concerns. So for the setback concerns, the setbacks are actually on Palliser Trail, which is the road closest to the highway, and not Palliser Lane, not Palliser Trail, Palliser Trail, not Palliser Lane. Palliser Lane would be the one that's between the subject property and the Blackiston property. So there's no changes to that setback towards the Blackiston. So so those concerns have been addressed with the concerned residents, and that information has been shared. And with respect to the other concerns, height concerns, shadows, parking, those are not subject to any of the amendments that are being proposed today, and any proposal would have to meet what's in the district currently. And in summary, administration has no concerns with the proposal and recommends that council gives first reading to bylaw 2024-37 and schedule a public hearing for March 4th, 2025.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation and going through those changes. I had a question of clarification around the first point. So removal of the setback to bring it to 0 meters. I may have heard you incorrectly, but then I thought you said, but it's dealt with elsewhere anyway, so we have 12 meters for landscaping.
That's correct, yeah. So within the site design section of the DC district, there is a specific section that requires them to have a 12-meter landscape buffer along that blue dashed section. So it's already taken care of. So we're just, we're basically allowing them a 0-meter buffer or 0-meter setback along that property line now, but they would still have to meet that landscaping buffer of 12 meters for that small section of the property.
So does that negate the need that CCH has to move closer to the boundary?
It doesn't negate the need. So what they're looking at is they're still, because the landscape buffer was listed within the area structure plan as a requirement for development along the highway. So CCH hasn't, they're not fighting that requirement in any way. They do acknowledge that a 12-meter buffer closest to the highway is necessary for the quality of living on that property to have some additional noise buffering. But I also indicated just on this property or on this slide, on the red X would be one of the points where they would like to go to the 0-meter setback. And that would,
So the landscape will take care of the blue.
Yeah.
But they want to go closer elsewhere. Okay, that part I didn't quite catch.
Oh, okay.
Now it makes sense. Okay. I'm glad I wasn't the only one. Wasn't the only one. Okay, thank you. And just further then, with a 0-meter setback, somebody hearing that might think, oh, you're going right to the road. But I imagine that there's some sort of actually natural.
Yeah. So for this specific property, just because the way the property boundaries were set up, there's actually still about, I think it's about 12 meters to the road from that red X to where Palliser Trail begins, because we still have that bike path.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that so nobody was thinking that we're butting up right to the road. Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we clarified everything. Thank you very much for your explanation. I don't see any other questions. So I'll move the council give first reading to revised land use bylaw amendment 2024-37, Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing Direct Control District, and schedule a public hearing for March 4th, 2025. Once again, I see this as a housekeeping matter in order to allow the project to meet the spirit and intent of the ASP while working within an abnormally shaped piece of property. I don't see anyone else wishing to speak, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Graham,
Is this gonna be March 4th or is this March 11th?
it's March 4th.
March 4th? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, there's so many public hearings, they're being split, yeah, between the two. Okay. I don't think we need a meeting break right at this point. Let's go to the next one and then we'll take a break after that. Is that fine with everybody? Okay, so we will move on then to item G3, Steep Creek updates to the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw. And Ms. Collette, welcome to council. The microphone is all yours.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Jenica Collette, and I'm going to be presenting Bylaws 2024-23 and 2024-24, which are amendments to the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw in response to Steep Creek updates. So in 2013, following the flooding events, amendments were made to the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw to add some rules and provisions to help protect the high hazard areas from future flood events. And now that the Cougar Creek debris flood retention structure is substantially complete, we can make changes to the MDP and the LUB to respond to the reduction in flood risk. Additionally, some Steep Creek hazard assessments have been completed in some of the study areas, so this is a good opportunity for us to respond to those as well. Bylaw 2024-23 speaks to the amendments to the Municipal Development Plan. Now, the MDP sets the overall policy direction for the town and also sets policies to guide development. Specifically, this amendment speaks to Section 3.5, which is the Steep Creek section, and 20.4, which is the development flowchart for Steep Creeks. Section 3.5.1 updates the description of safety risk tolerance criteria and then the accompanying figure, and that's really in response to current standards and best practices for safety and risk tolerance. It also proposes to remove the development hold zone. The development hold zone was originally introduced specifically for the Cougar Creek area and was never applied. Instead, the low hazard zone was applied in that case. So since we don't need it any longer, we can remove that. And then the addition of the residual hazard zone, which will be applied to the Cougar Creek area, it will have the same rules as the low hazard area. And the intent of the residual hazard zone really is to acknowledge the fact that there is residual risk in the event that the structure fails or is overwhelmed by a flood event. Bylaw 2024-24 is the amendment to the Land Use Bylaw, which sets very specific provisions for how development occurs in the town. Specifically, Section 7.8.1.1, subsection A, restricts development for additions to existing development in Steep Creek hazard areas. Additions will still be allowed, but it further restricts them so that windows and doorways cannot be at grade. So that just further helps protect in the event of a flood event for any additions. And then the proposed amendment adds to Section 7.8.4 the residual hazard zone, which I mentioned previously. And then the same requirements of the low hazard zone would apply there. It also seeks to remove the Section 7.8.6, which is the development hold zone that's no longer needed. There is also some significant amendments to the Steep Creek hazard mapping, specifically to the addition of the residual hazard zone. And then those changes are based on a residual risk assessment with the completion of the Cougar Creek mitigation structure. There's also some changes based on studies through the Three Sisters Village Area Structure Plan and Smith Creek Area Structure Plan that can help inform the application of the correct zones. Formerly, they were plan study areas, so additional studies would have been applied or required for future development. This is a very terrible map because the steep creeks kind of span all across the town, but it gives you an idea of where the different hazard zones are applicable. Administration recommends that council give first reading to Bylaw 2024-23, Steep Creek updates to the Municipal Development Plan, and first reading to Bylaw 2024-24, Steep Creek updates to the Land Use Bylaw. And that council schedule a single public hearing for Bylaw 2024-23 and 2024-24 on March 4th. March 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collette. A couple of lights have lit up here, so Councillor Graham and then Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. A question about the at-grade building requirements. My understanding is some of those zones have the ability to have a basement suite in them currently. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So if you're not allowed to have a window at grade, does that actually kind of negate the ability to have a basement suite?
You would have a window higher than grade. So it's just not so that water's pouring directly into your window. You would have to raise it up. So
Yeah,
you wouldn't want like window wells
Right,
and
so
things
the
like
basement
that.
suites that have like window wells, that we would no longer accept that.
Yes, it would limit your
And so that would
ability to
limit
have
that.
like window wells.
Yeah.
And you would still have to meet your egress requirements as well through the building code.
Right.
So you would be limited depending on the existing structure of the house and where your floor elevation is.
And just so I understand, if I currently have a basement suite that is designed with window wells, am I now non-conforming?
This only would
legal
apply to
non-conforming?
additions. So if you're going to add a basement addition
Yeah.
to your house, which would be quite challenging, it would apply in that case.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you for the presentation. Within bylaw 2024-23, just under the provision section 4, for the new development, for what's being substituted, for new development, group risk shall be at or below the reference line of figure 1, and then individual risk PDI shall not exceed 1 in 100,000.
Where are you? Which
So
page?
that's page 152 out of 686. And then right after that, it just repeats itself, saying for new development, the individual risk shall not exceed 1 in 100. So I think there's just been some duplication in that section because it just, when I read it, it just repeats itself. So I'm just.
What section again?
So it's section, under provision section 4. So it's got the first bit of what is being struck out, and then for substituting, A, for new developments, I, group risk shall be at or below the reference line of figure 1, and then double I, the individual risk PDI shall not exceed 1 in 100,000, and then period, and then for new development, the individual risk PDI shall not exceed 1 in 100,000. But that's already been said with how the section's written, so it just seems like it's got
Okay.
doubled down. So
Okay, so.
whether that needs to be amended now or at second reading, just.
Okay, so you're referring to section 4 of
Yeah.
the bylaw 2024-23, the new wording proposed for A sub Roman numeral 2.
Yeah.
Okay,
Again, I don't want to necessarily amend it now just because maybe it is meant to be that way. Just when you read it, it just
okay,
sounds
so
like
that
it's
can be
repeating
left with
itself.
administration to look at to determine if it's proper wording, and then at second reading, could come back with a proposed amendment if that's necessary. And if it's appropriate wording, then no amendment
Yeah.
would be recommended.
It just sounds strange at the moment. So
Okay. Yeah, it does look to duplicate, but it might be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Smithers?
I believe administration has already reviewed that and agreed that from the amending bylaw, that second sentence about for new development could be struck. Is that correct? Yeah, and I believe I was under the and my apologies for the confusion on this. I was under the understanding as well that clerks had a motion to do that for the amending bylaw.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
okay, so we will
So we can, so when we
amend to
get to
strike that
that
out.
part, we can
Okay.
make that change, yes.
Great, thank you. We'll wait for that when I put the motion on the table then. And thank you for that, Mr. Rose. I don't see any other questions. Actually, I do have one question, and I'm not sure if it's for you or Mr. Sarte or Ms. Smithers. For residual hazard zones, are there other areas that would apply? I believe a letter was sent that was copied to council around the Rundleview area and having to deal with the forebay. And I was wondering, does that meet the definition of residual hazard zone or not, and why? Yeah, Mr. Asarte.
For the purpose of this bylaw, it could be contemplated that other residual hazard zones would apply to steep creek areas. So for example, Stoneworks Creek once mitigated, quite likely we would want to consider a residual hazard zone beyond the mitigation. It hasn't been contemplated for other types of hazards, but certainly the risk framework allows for all hazards to be treated similarly, and that's certainly something.
So dealing with that reservoir or overland from the Bow River, those don't fall into what is currently residual hazard zones.
That's very specific to steep creeks.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that clarification. All right, and I see no other questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Collette. Okay, I am going to move that council give first reading to the Town of Canmore Municipal Development Plan Bylaw Amendment 2024-23. I would just like to say that I'm pleased that we are at this point of adjusting hazards and risk, because it shows that we're making progress in protecting our community and quite significant progress. And so this, having been on council when the Steep Creek policies came in, this is the next evolution of what happens as you progress. And so I'm very, very happy that these changes are coming forward, because it means positive impact on our community. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give first reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2024-24. Anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I move that council schedule a single public hearing for bylaws 2024-23 and 2024-24 on March 4th, 2025. Anyone wishing to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, before we break, I do want to note that Mr. Asarte, that was probably the last time that you'll be speaking to council. Oh, second last. What's that? Oh, you're back this afternoon. In fact, then I will wait to talk to you after your last one. Oh, you're here with the engineering design and construction guidelines. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know if Mr. Kinsey would be doing that one or not. So anyway, so thank you. We will take a break now then. And, okay, so which one was it? Was it the 2020, the 23? Okay. All right, we're gonna have to back up then. Yeah. Couldn't it be brought at second reading now that we've already gone through it? Because it was better if it's in the report then too. So, yeah. Yeah, it's not a material change. It's almost editorial in nature, actually. Yeah, okay. So since we've already approved it, let's bring it for second reading. put it in the report if it's something that's required. Okay, we'll have a break then until 10:05. Okay? All right, we are back. And we're now moving to item G4, which is the Municipal Policing Committee Establishment Bylaw 2025-01. Mr. Burt, welcome to council.
Good morning, Mayor Krauser, members of council. First bylaw of the year is what I'm hearing, 2024-01. So we've got it. I'm presenting on behalf of Protective Services Manager Caitlin Miller as she is busy at G7 planning today. I do feel as though I've got a little bit of experience talking about police committees, so I will do my best to answer any questions, and also in attendance is Staff Sergeant Greg Tulloch to answer more questions as he and Ms. Miller have been involved with meetings with the province. All right, history of the Municipal Policing Committee in Canmore. So, like I said, I had a bit of experience. The town of Canmore had a policing committee bylaw in place from 2009 to 2019. The bylaw was repealed as it was not mandatory under the Police Act, and there weren't regulations to have one. An alternate model of oversight of the Municipal Police Service Agreement, or commonly referred to as the MPSA, if you want to add that to your acronym bucket, and public engagement on policing priorities was expected to be more efficient while maintaining the same or better results. The alternate model consisted of an annual review and agreement on policing priorities between the manager of protective services, the CAO, and the mayor. The town of Canmore has a very positive working relationship with the local RCMP detachment and the detachment commander. He also has a fantastic name. The detachment commander regularly shares updates and statistics through the committee as a whole, administrative updates. Ms. Miller routinely and regularly meets with Staff Sergeant Tulloch, as do I. And we get to participate in the annual policing priorities, or the APP process, with elected officials and administration. We look for opportunities to engage directly with the community as well. Most recently, Staff Sergeant Tulloch and myself we're at one of the local coffee shops doing a coffee with a cop, just an informal meet and greet to seek and obtain feedback. And we had a really good discussion with a local developer. It was just a total happenstance situation. He came and sat beside us at the table. We introduced ourselves, and yeah, it was a really good kind of half-hour, 45-minute informal conversation about policing priorities. How does he as a developer address a situation that he was dealing with? So again, having some of those informal or scheduled conversations has been working really well. The Canmore RCMP detachment has a strong culture of collaboration and coordination with town departments, and the detachment commander regularly meets with administration to discuss community public safety trends. Complaints regarding RCMP members go through the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, which is an independent agency that reviews complaints made by the public about the on-duty conduct of RCMP members. For the reasons outlined above, reinstating the police committee had not been recommended by administration. So if we go back in time, essentially things were working really well. Then there were changes to provincial legislation. So the government of Alberta is enhancing civilian governance of the RCMP by proclaiming sections of the Police Amendment Act 2022 and creating the Police Governance Regulation and Police Governance Ministerial Regulation. That's a mouthful. The government of Alberta expects that these amendments will ensure communities policed by the RCMP have a voice in setting local and province-wide policing priorities and performance goals by creating... Good? Okay. All right. Sorry, I thought you were calling me there. By creating municipal and regional policing committees, as well as a provincial police advisory board. Every community in Alberta served by the RCMP is required to be represented by a governance board, depending on their population size and type of service agreement. The town of Canmore is required to establish a municipal policing committee through bylaw by March 1st of this year. So that's what's brought us here. Policing committee makeup. So with the enactment of the Police Amendment Act and the accompanying regulations, communities with a population over 15,000, of which we are policed by the RCMP are required to establish the Municipal Policing Committee. These committees must consist of 3 to 7 members that are appointed by the municipality's council. These committees must consist of public members and a maximum of 2 council members. The Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services may also appoint members to the Municipal Policing Committee, and these appointees may be added to committees after municipal appointments are completed. The function of the committee will be to enhance civilian governance of local policing. The Government of Alberta expects this to be achieved by the committee fulfilling the following duties and responsibilities. Oversee the administration of the MPSA, represent the interests and concerns of the public and of council to the officer in charge, develop a yearly plan of priorities and strategies for municipal policing in consultation with the officer in charge, again, detachment commander, develop a community safety plan in conjunction with the local police detachment and CAO, including a plan for collaboration between the community and community agencies, and providing the community safety plan annually or on request to the minister. So that's one new piece, one new component that was different from the previous police committee. Assisting in the selection of the officer in charge, reporting annually or on request to the minister on the implementation of and updates to programs and services to achieve the priorities of the police service. Municipal policing committees are required to consider provincial policing priorities when setting local ones. Staff Sergeant Tollett can speak further to that, but there's always federal, provincial, and then municipal policing priorities. So there are things set by the province throughout the province for all detachments. So, Bylaw 2024-01. So the attached bylaw meets the requirements as outlined by the police governance regulation. Administration is recommending that the committee be comprised of 5 municipal appointees and have a quorum of 3 members, and one of the committee members be a member of council. If the member of council appointed to the committee is the mayor, Mayor Krauser, you would not be allowed to chair the Municipal Policing Committee as per the regulations. Enhanced security checks are required to be a member of the committee, and the official appointment to the committee cannot take place until that check is obtained. Apply, get the enhanced check, which can take a significant amount of time. Appointment can't take place. For that reason, the Government of Alberta has recommended that recruitment take place as soon as possible due to the potentially long processing time for the enhanced police checks. Given that the RCMP's annual policing priorities process occurs in April, based on their fiscal calendar year, and it is being unlikely that recruitment will be completed before the 2025 to 2026 APP annual policing priorities document that's required, administration recommends that the recruitment for the new Municipal Policing Committee occur at the same time as recruitment for all committees, and that council appoint individuals to the committee at the annual organizational meeting, typically held in October of each year. This will provide committee appointees and applicants opportunity to get their enhanced security clearances and complete the police governance e-learning online training package that is still in development by the Government of Alberta ahead of the 2026 to 2027 RCMP fiscal year. Alternatives. The town of Canmore could establish a joint policing committee with the town of Banff or the MD of Bighorn. Given the different sizes and population, the gap in the regulations regarding joint municipal committee makeup, and different community public safety concerns in both municipalities, This alternative is not recommended by administration. While there are some administrative efficiencies that can be realized through a regional approach, there is a lack of clarity when it comes to how to ensure fair and proportional representation would exist for communities participating on a joint committee. I think we all know that our communities, although we're geographically located, have some similarities, but there's some significant differences. The MD of Bighorn has the added complexity of being under a provincial policing service agreement instead of a municipal policing service agreement. So while part of the MD of Bighorn is served by the Canmore detachment, they have different requirements for the police committees due to their population size under the regulation. Banff was presented this alternative at their council meeting last week and have asked administration to establish their own municipal committee. So operational impacts include the organization and administration of the police committee meetings. This will be led by the Manager of Protective Services and the RCMP Detachment Commander. Recruitment for committee members will be done by the Municipal Clerk's Office, along with the recruitment for all committees. The additional fees for the enhanced security checks will need to be added to the policing budget. So the total cost of all enhanced security clearance checks for the Municipal Policing Committee is estimated to be $500 every 2 years and can be absorbed within the existing policing budget. Staff Sergeant Tulloch provided input on administration's recommendation regarding the Municipal Policing Committee makeup and is being engaged on the information that is being received from the Government of Alberta to the municipality. The General Manager of Municipal Services and Manager of Protective Services attended an information webinar hosted by the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. With that, I leave you with the recommendation per the report and available along with Staff Sergeant Tulloch for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Burt, and welcome, Staff Sergeant Tulloch. Appreciate you being here today. I just wanted to note and just see if your understanding is the same as mine. With the police governance regulation, not the ministerial one, but the governance one. So I'm on page 206 and 207 of our agenda package. Under section 4, sub 2, it talks about the duties and functions of the municipal policing committees. And D is developing a community safety plan, as you mentioned, in conjunction with the local police detachment and chief elected official. So even if I'm not on the committee then, I'd still be involved in that process pursuant to the regulations? Is that the way you would read that?
Yeah, that's how I would interpret it.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, okay. That's good to know for when we come time for appointments and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks for clarification.
yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Ma.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Burt, and thank you for being here, Staff Sergeant Tulloch. There's a section here where it says, the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services may also appoint members to Municipal Policing Committee, and these appointees may be added to committees after municipal appointments are completed. What sort of scenario would justify that sort of action? I'm trying to, yeah. They don't like our appointments, or?
I think that's the kind of thing that's kind of way outside of
Yeah,
our wheelhouse, where if the government of Alberta is not satisfied with how the police committee is being managed, perhaps they step in and add their own, but none of that is specifically clear.
Okay,
so
all
I
right.
think that it's totally in their discretion.
Okay, all right. Just trying to understand, do you guys have any more insight on that piece at all? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Mr. Burt, I wonder if you could give more clarity around the timelines to get your enhanced security. You said a significant amount of time, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, defer to my friend here.
So that's another thing that's a little muddy, I would say. I've had some conversations with Caitlin Miller about that. Obviously, the first point of contact is us for security clearances, and I didn't have an answer at the beginning either. So I look to the people that do it internally for us, and they also, same sort of thing. because this is a mandate of the provincial government that the committees have security clearances rather than an RCMP mandate, it's something that is left to the provincial government to manage. So how that takes place, what it costs, who's involved, those are answers that I don't have. They weren't provided to me through my chain of knowledge base, I suppose. So I really couldn't tell you. That's provincial government demanding those things and should have a method in place to make that happen. Yeah, that's not the answer you want.
That's not the answer I was looking
So
for.
that supports also our rationale for not appointing until an organizational meeting, so that some of these things will obviously be able to be discussed with the government and get a sense of what actual steps are required.
Yeah, those answers should be available to you, but I'm not sure why they aren't.
Okay.
I don't have those answers.
Okay.
Never mind, I won't ask.
Thank you.
And just on the timing, then I understand there has been some briefing sessions, and when I think Ms. Miller was part of them, so I don't know if either you were part of them. And we are meeting the obligation to establish the committee by bylaw by March 1st.
Yes.
The timing to go to October, I mean, it seems reasonable to me. Do you know if that has been floated with the government to make sure we're on side, or?
I'm not sure. I can get back to you on that.
I don't have an answer
Okay.
for that either.
Okay, well, it seems to be reasonable to me, but I would just hope that we're on side with what's required.
What I can commit to do is following up with Ms. Miller to see if there are any concerns, and if so, we will figure out how to address that, but she didn't flag anything for me.
Okay, great, that would be appreciated.
You bet.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Graham?
Just a little bit of a process one. So if somebody needs their security clearance, enhanced security clearance, and we get to October, so should they have that security clearance before they apply, or after they apply and then it takes them out of time? Let's just say it takes 6 months. And then we can't really form that committee until they get that clearance. So did they get the clearance beforehand, or before they apply, or after they apply?
So I think in your presentation, you established that a committee member can't be a committee member until they have that security clearance.
Yeah.
So obviously it would be better to, I mean, you could establish the people that you want, have them begin the security clearance process, and then confirm them as members of the committee once that security clearance has taken place. One would hope that one would know if they're going to pass a security clearance and probably not apply if they won't.
Sure.
The enhanced reliability screening is not as onerous as, say, what I would go through to maintain my security clearance, so it should be a little quicker. But I couldn't tell you specifically what that time frame is, because, like I said, our people that do it for our internal processes will have a time frame that is likely different than what whoever is doing it for the province of Alberta will have. Difficult to say what that'll look like.
I trust that we'll cross these bridges as we need to.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you.
I'll move that council give first reading to Municipal Policing Committee Establishment Bylaw 2025-01. Of course, we are required to have a municipal policing committee in place, and so that's why this is before us today, and we need to do so before March 1st, thus the importance of getting it onto this council agenda. I do support the establishment so that we're in compliance with the provincial requirements and regulations, and look forward to having our questions answered prior to the time of the organizational meeting in October, so that we can ensure that this board is equipped with people having the proper clearance and the proper training, and therefore able to perform the duties as set out in the regulations. Councillor Faubert, you'd like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'm going to speak in favor. I know that this is something that's required of us by the province, but I'm also cautiously optimistic that having a voice as a community in how we are policed is something that is beneficial to us. And so I appreciate the approach that administration has taken, given some of the uncertainties here, and I look forward to the work that this committee does in 2026. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I move the council give second reading to Municipal Policing Committee Establishment Bylaw 2025-01. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll move the council give leave to go to third reading of Municipal Policing Committee Establishment Bylaw 2025-01. Anyone wishing to speak to that motion? Call the motion, or call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I move the council give third reading to the Municipal Policing Committee Establishment Bylaw 2025-01. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Great, thank you very much. We'll now move to item H1, Council Remuneration Policy.
Good morning. My name is Joanna Sauvé, and I'm here today to present the updated council remuneration policy and to seek council's approval for the policy as presented. Just a recap of the journey that brought us to where we are today. It's been our first time on this road. In May of 2023, the Council Remuneration Review Committee bylaw was approved. That was a great first step. In October, the committee members were appointed, and in June, the committee's recommendations were presented to and approved by council. In October, we brought our council maternity and parental leaves bylaw forward, and that was approved, which is an impactful step forward. And then in November, a council leaves policy was approved. In December, the council remuneration policy came forward for discussion at Committee of the Whole. And so this has been a pretty robust and public journey, and that brings us to where we are today, where we're presenting the policy and bringing it forward. And it is the final piece of work to complete the implementation of the recommendations of our first ever Council Remuneration Committee. So that's also exciting. It's really important to bring attention to the committee's mandate because it's the driving purpose behind the work and the recommendations. And in a nutshell, the committee's key goal was to recommend a compensation plan that supports making the role of the elected official more feasible and sustainable for any community member so that we can have representation from a broader range of demographics in our community. Also important to talk about the context. So this quote actually comes from the final recommendation report from the Council Remuneration Review Committee. And really what they wanted to have everyone understand is that the approach they were taking to their recommendations really had some key considerations in it. They didn't want to take a formulaic approach where we look at what other municipalities are doing and say we have a target within that range. That didn't really seem fitting for our community. There were a few things that were important in that. One is that council must live here and thus experience our higher cost of living. They can't also live in a different community where there might be more housing available or lower. They have to be here. Also, our growth rate, our environment, our ecology and tourism make the work of council higher volume and more complex than what would typically be experienced by other communities of our size. And they recognize that this isn't really a full-time job, but it isn't really a part-time, like it's more than part-time as well. And whether you call it full-time or part-time, it can still be really challenging to maintain other employment when you take on this commitment. The volume of work, the change in, it's not steady work. It just makes it hard to maintain other reliable employment. So for that reason, their recommendations were rooted in local context rather than a formulaic approach. So when we get to their recommendations and the changes that are being brought forth today in the policy, this is a summary of the changes. We've reviewed them one by one in public before, so I'm not intending to do that, but happy to look at anything in greater detail if needed. So the first key change is that this policy becomes effective in October with the new council. So that means you are not approving an increase to your own rate of pay, and that is important. This is for future council. One of the other impactful changes that is included in this policy is there was some shifting of the items that are included in base pay versus what's included in per diems. So in base pay, the committee wanted to include pretty much everything that is non-optional and equally shared across council members, and then keep all of the optional and variable things in per diem. So some things were shifted and moved around. The impact of that being we should see a reduction in administration, so there are less per diems to submit and process over the year. A little bit of equalization of pay over the year as well, so less fluctuations in high times and low times of pay. And also we'll see a decrease in the number of per diems that are claimed. So the committee anticipated that we would see about $7,000 on average less per council member throughout the year. This policy includes a change to council's base pay to $53,000. And that would be from an anticipated 35 if we look at previous rates and apply COLA. And an increase to the mayor's pay to $130,000. Also included was the application of RRSPs on per diem. So previously or currently, per diem RRSP is calculated only on council base pay. Moving forward, RRSPs would be calculated on everything, including per diems. It includes council's ability to participate in the Bring Your Own Device program, which is something that we do within administration, and it's about $25 a month for those who use their cell phone for work. There's one change to require receipts for expense reimbursements, which is all aligned with our practice anyway, so now it's institutionalized. And another change to have there be no reduction to reimbursement for personal vehicle use if you're using it for overnight travel. So that's a summary of all the key financial changes. There are some additional changes in the policy for housekeeping, a few wording amendments, and a new definition was added, but these are the key items for pay. The financial impact of these changes is anticipated to be about $161,000, which amounts to a 0.4% tax increase, 83 cents a month for an average household. This includes $126,000 for increase to pay and per diems, to base pay really. About $14,000 for the increase to RSPs, about $2,100 for all council for the year for the Bring Your Own Device program, and an impact to benefits of premiums and statutory deductions anticipated to be about $19,000. So that is the total financial impact. So with that, I recommend that council approve the council remuneration policy as presented in the package.
Thank you, Ms. Sauvé. I'm going to open it up now to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Mott.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Ms. Sauvé. In terms of further questions, I don't have further questions, but Mayor, I did have two motions I'd like to bring forth, but I don't know if this is the right timing or if I should wait further for opening table for any other questions.
Did you want to ask questions that support your motion as far as financial impact?
Yeah, if I could bring those motions up, that'd be helpful, and then I can ask them there.
Why don't you just add, yeah, you can give some indication what the motion is, but because I know you
Sure.
received some information
Yes.
from the survey, and it's important that it's into the public realm.
For sure, thank you. I know the clerks also have the two motions as well. I think one of the great things when we had this report was that Councillor McCallum asked for a bit of an analysis on per diems versus COLA for councillors. And so that we kind of got a little bit of insight there on how our various levels work. And we're a little bit low on some of them. And so I asked Ms. Sauvé if she could do an analysis if I propose a slight change to per diem rates moving forward for future council in 2025. And so those rates changed from the 4-hour rate, which is currently $125, if we bumped it up to $130. And for the 4 to 8 hour range, if we change that from $225 to $260, and then for the 8-hour range, which is currently $350, elevating that to $390. And I was just curious what the impact would be. And so they came back with an impact, a cumulative impact across all 6 councillors was quite low, $6,000. So at $6,000, I felt that would be a justifiable change to move forward with that proposed motion, which I hope you guys would support.
So the question then is, $6,000 is the estimated impact if those rates were applied to this past year?
Yeah.
Correct?
That's like a question-answer question. I'm sorry. I'm
Yes.
trying my best. That's all I'm saying.
So with the per diem, with the amounts for shifting and claiming, I looked at the things that would be eligible for per diems under these council changes, and had a look at what had been claimed in 2024, and the anticipated impact would be about $6,000 for all council for the year. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so before we get to any motion, we'll continue with questions. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Ms. Sauvé. Is this a process that now will continue? So in the next term, we'll appoint another remuneration review committee, and they'll look at perhaps different items that this last committee didn't review?
Yes, good question, thank you. The council remuneration bylaw, committee bylaw, or review committee bylaw, lots of words, is established so that this committee would happen prior to every next council's pay. And so they will review all of the work of the prior council, as well as any recommendations that the prior committee recommended for them to look at, including per diems.
So that process that you described, the timeline will happen with every council term?
Yep.
Right, thank you. Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. If you don't have the answer to this, it's totally fine. It came to me a moment ago. Can you tell me how many of our per diems were 4-hour ones, how many were 4 to 8, and how many were 8+, roughly?
I definitely can't tell you that off the top of my head.
Excellent.
But that is information that we can pull for you.
Oh, you can't? Okay. That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's fine.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Ms. Sauvé. Clarification is 6,000 inclusive of all councillors, correct? Not
Yes, it
individually?
is. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted clarification, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. So I will move that council approve council remuneration policy EX002 as presented. And I will turn the floor over to Councillor Ma to introduce the motion that he was describing.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. As noted by the clerks that brought up here, I'm moving this motion that council amend section 16 by striking out the current per diem rates and substituting as follows: $130 for up to 4 hours, $260 for 4 to 8 hours, and $390 for over to 8 hours. As mentioned by Ms. Sauvé, the general impact across the cumulative organization for councillors is quite low, $6K. However, I do think it brings us up to a level that is a little more representative when we factor in COLA. I do know like our big goal of the committee was to create a package that allows being a councillor to be a little more accessible, and I think this kind of tightens up that piece. And as opposed to waiting until 2029 for the next future council to determine for the council after that to change per diem rates, I think that leads to a bigger change in discrepancy at that point. So I would hope for your support. Thank you.
Okay, and just so, for the purposes of accessibility, would you like to read your motion?
Yep, I can read it again. Moved by Councillor Ma that council amend section 16 by striking out the per diem rates and substituting as follows: $130 for up to 4 hours, so that's a change in $5. $260 for 4 to 8 hours, which is a delta of approximately for 35, and a change for the 8-hour rate of $390, which is a slight shift from $350. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Councillor Faubert?
Okay, I am challenged slightly in two areas of this. One, I do agree in principle that COLA is something that should be considered and applied to per diems. But I also believe that the Remuneration Committee is the process for us as council to change these types of things after a review. And the half that's missing for me is that this may change the per diem amounts to an up, if the graph is correct, or not. I didn't mean that. I mean, there's a graph in the staff report, and I see that these numbers align with where COLA would put them today. But what this doesn't do is establish a policy that applies COLA to it moving forward. And so I feel like there's still, this is an area that I really did want the Remuneration Committee to do some work on, because it's not just the amount, it's that the policy would then need to be changed to apply COLA to the amount consistently over time as well. And so, in principle, I really do support this motion by Councillor Ma, but in terms of process, I'm not sure that I'm at the right time for me to move forward with this part of a change that I see happening through another process. If that makes sense, thank you.
My expectation is this would just be a rate that would apply. In terms of the discussion about COLA, which I hear your sentiment, I do feel the COLA discussion is something that does need to be brought in under a new remuneration committee. So I know at one point it was like, well, maybe we should establish that policy, but really that then leads to interesting situations where what if the organization is not being given COLA and we have locked COLA in for the future council, which does not seem correct. This is really just a new set of flat rates that would apply for the 2025 to 2029 council. And during that time, the Remuneration Committee can determine if there's a better strategy if COLA should be applied to that. Thanks.
Am I correct in understanding you actually have another motion to that effect following this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so Councillor Hillstad?
I'm leaning towards supporting this motion. The last time we updated the per diems schedule was in 2019, which was partway through a council term. So I don't think it's unnecessary to wait. Again, now if we do this currently with the Council Remuneration Committee, it would be not until, as Councillor Moss stated, 2029, like the last year of next term. So we'd then be potentially out of date for an additional 4 years. So I think now doing the adjustment for the next council gives a good starting point, and then discussions around whether COLA applies or not. As COLA does apply to our base salary, we are getting a partial COLA, and there are years where COLA doesn't get applied. So I think I'm going to support this, again, just to enable future councils to look into it more. And I know there's more motions coming, so, but I think I'm okay with this small increase that, again, if it's 6,000 total, it's about 1,000 per councillor on average. So, it just gives the next council a good starting point and gets us to where, if we had been applying COLA since 2014, where we'd be at today anyways. So it just gets us to a good starting point, in my opinion.
Councillor Mara?
Thank you. I'm looking to support this motion. I have listened to everything that Councillor Moss said to back this, and I agree with him. And knowing that it's not going to be reviewed again until 2029, or previously to that, so I will support this motion.
Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Your Worship. I too will support this motion, and I'm aware that Councillor Moss is going to bring another motion here forward, and if he doesn't, then somebody else probably will. I just ran COLA. The way we calculated COLA in this was based on the 2013 base rate of 100. However, if you actually jump to 2019 and then ran the COLA numbers from there, we're actually at 141.60. So I think this is a very reasonable upgrade. It's only $5. In fact, I think I could argue that from the 2013 to 2019, we went up by $25. And I think you could actually argue for a $25 increase in the base rate one, but I think we'll leave it as is for now.
Okay. And so, just to be clear, it's $5 for the
correct. Yes.
The initial one.
Yeah,
it's more than that for subsequent.
I would think the vast majority.
But your point is well made.
The vast majority of our per diems are probably in that up to 4 hours realm. So.
Okay. Thank you. In speaking to the motion, I'm inclined to support it, but it's not without reservation. I would prefer the process have been through the Remuneration Review Committee, which it will be going forward, and that's what was in the report. However, the numbers that are being proposed do make sense as an alignment with what was set out in 2014. It had grown, and I do think that to leave them at that current rate for another 4 years is to undervalue, given the loss in spending power that one would have over that period of time due to cost of living increases. And so I am inclined to support this and then leave future increases to hear from the Remuneration Review Committee before they are considered by council. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma, would you like to close?
I just wanted to say thank you for everyone's interesting points and thoughts there. Councillor Flaubert, I think you brought us some great things, which will hopefully be encompassed to your satisfaction in the future motion that's coming up right after. And yeah, at the end of the day, like, these benefits are really for the next future council, and hopefully setting a a signpost to them that they can continue to work on valuing what future councils move on from that point. As noted, the cumulative sum effect is really quite low, $6,000. As we've restructured our per diem rates, a lot of our per diems won't actually be even affected by this because it goes under our base pay. With regards to some of the changes on the higher rates, such as the 4 to 8 hours, I don't think very often do we hit that level. And in terms of like the 8 hours and beyond, in my own personal experience, maybe if I'm on conference for a couple of days a year, I might hit that rate, but really those sums are not that impactful. So thank you.
Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Councillor Ma, you can move to your second motion then, please.
Sure, if the clerks would please assist me and bring that up.
Oh,
I think
Sorry.
that the next motion is not an amendment to the policy. So I think your
we'll
your
do
move
it-
to
we'll do
approve
it
the
as a
policy is what
we'll
is
do
on
it
the
as a
floor right
motion
now.
arising then after
Yeah.
we
Okay.
deal with the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hyde. In that case, I will bring a motion. This is just some clarification around section 22, and this is around vehicle usage. And so we're on page 226 of the agenda package, and there is wording in there pursuant to the Committee of the Whole's recommendation that for overnight travel, an automobile allowance for use of the personally owned vehicle will be set at the CRA rate. But the last line does say if council chooses to use a personally owned vehicle when a town vehicle is available, then it's 20%. So just to be perfectly clear, I would like to move that council amends section 22 to insert except for overnight travel, comma, and put that before if council chooses to use a personal vehicle. Then it makes it perfectly clear those two sentences stand together, and it's clear that the reduced rate is only for travel that's not overnight. So I'd ask that you support this to just give effect to the intent of that section. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Graham.
This is gonna be the most grammatically, is the wording correct? If council chooses or if a councillor chooses?
Well, it's grammatically correct with respect to the paragraph. You're right, the proper wording throughout might be let's see.
We don't travel as a whole very often.
Yeah, so let me just see what up here. Yeah, it does refer to, so it might be proper to say it as a member of council. That's a different amendment. So what I will do is I would like to all right, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, let's stick with this amendment, and then I will move that we change council in that paragraph to member of council.
In a couple,
Could we just take a break?
All right, we'll take a quick break. Okay, we're back, and we've sought some clarity around the wording. So I have a motion on the table to bring clarity that except for overnight travel, if a town vehicle is available, it will be at a reduced rate. And so I'd like to know if anybody would like to speak to that motion. Okay, seeing none, then I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Councillor Graham, you had raised the question of whether it was proper to say council, given that we don't often all travel together, and maybe it's members of council is more appropriate. We did have a quick discussion around that meaning it could go either way. Are you happy to leave it, or would you like to bring an amending motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm fine with leaving it the way it is. It is defined in the definitions. It's grammatically a little bit weird, but it's fine.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right then, so we are back to our main motion, but instead of as presented, as amended, so that council approve the council remuneration policy EX 002 as amended. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councillor Faubert.
I know I have spoken to this process before, but I just really want to thank administration, council, and members of the committee for all of the work. This doesn't just establish updated compensation, it sets a new process moving forward. And I really appreciate that our community is stepping up and getting engaged in these types of discussions. And I think this type of work really supports democracy, even though it feels really weird because we're voting on our own pay. Thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Faubert. And that is if those on council are re-elected. Because of course, this won't take effect until after the next election. And so I also support it. I also hope that it encourages people to be able to run by bringing our remuneration more in line with the higher cost of living here and the amount of work that has to be done. And I also echo Councillor Faubert's thanks to administration for working with the brand new remuneration review committee and establishing a very strong base going forward. I think it was a very good process, and very much appreciate all of the work done both by administration and our excellent volunteers on the committee. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really not much more to say beyond what yourself and Councillor Faubert have brought up. But yeah, no one goes on council to put in their sports car on the driveway. But it's definitely one of those positions where, while it is a labor of love, I do feel the excellent work by admin, the fantastic work by the most recent committee have elevated the role to a point where future leadership for this community will be able to do so at less of a sacrifice. And by that, I hope we have a broader range of candidates and continue exceptional candidates, because this is a very challenging, unique role. And I do feel as we are sharpening up our compensation for it, it does not no longer preclude great people from trying. So thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I think you all spoke very eloquently to that. I think the accessibility to this role so that we can have diverse opinions at this dais is critically important to this community. And I think that this is a big step forward in that direction. And I know it's already been said a number of times, but I will say thank you to everybody that has partaken in this process. Thank you to Councillor Faubert for originally bringing up this idea of having a council remuneration committee. I think they all did fantastic work. I think administration does fantastic work, and it is up to our discretion as to whether or not we want to make small changes to that. And I think we've made things that are appropriate. So thank you all for everything you've done, and I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Hillstadt.
I concur with what everyone has said. I'm not going to add anything other than my thanks again to the committee and to all of admin for the hard work that's gone into this. It definitely puts the future candidates on a solid footing. And once we approve this, then when people decide if they want to run or not, they'll actually know what they're potentially getting paid. So that's a good thing. So I'm happy to support.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And before we move to the next agenda item, Councillor Ma, you had a motion arising.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct, Your Worship. If clerks could bring that motion up. This is one of those motions where I feel Councillor Faubert kind of was able to see around corners and predict where it was going, which is a testament to how great she is at process. So this motion here is that council direct administration to work with the next council remuneration committee to undertake an evaluation of the long-term impact of the inclusion of COLA on per diem rates and bring back recommendations for an approach to per diems that accounts for COLA over time. I do feel this piece has a degree of complexity to it. And I think just understanding what the potential ramifications could be, this is a great project for the next remuneration committee to look at and to establish for future councils beyond 2029 what that process could be. So I would hope you guys support this. I do feel it's in the spirit of great process, transparency, and kind of like turns one more stone to just understand how compensation could be applied to this role. Thank you.
Councillor Faubert, you'd like to speak to the motion?
I have a question.
Okay.
And that's, would we do a new terms of reference for the next committee? Or was the terms of reference to establish the committee and the bylaw? Or I don't know if that's the right question. But in the next council remuneration committee process, will there be an opportunity for this and perhaps additional direction to be given to the committee through a terms of reference, or is this a helpful process now?
Ms. Sauvé, did you have something that you could provide in that regard?
I believe that the bylaw has the terms of reference in it,
Okay.
and we could bring it back to include this in the mandate. Great.
That helps me. I'll support the motion. I think it's important that we identify the areas for the committee's work in the future, and this is one of those areas that I think we could use some recommendations on. Thank you.
So I believe that the bylaw stands for itself and this can be added to it. That said, if a future council wants to update the terms, they're certainly open to do so. Okay. And thank you, Ms. Sauvé, for that information. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too will support the motion. In fact, I probably could have supported a amendment to the previous bylaw to include COLA in council per diems 10 minutes ago, and saved us all a little bit of work here. I believe that we apply COLA to the entire organization, and I believe council per diem should be included in that fairly strongly. So I look forward to this process and seeing what comes of it.
And speaking to the motion, I actually appreciate this being brought up at this time because I'm not certain I could have approved it at the earlier without having the information that this motion seeks. So I will support this motion and look forward to that work being done during the next term, if approved. Councillor Hillstadt.
Thank you. I will also support this motion. I like the fact that this motion, is trying to look at the long-term effects that COLA could have on per diems. And again, who knows what recommendations will come back. We'll find that out in the future, but we could get to a point some years down the road where per diems are no longer even a thing and it's just pure base salary. So this, I think, gives that wiggle room to figure out where we need to go and if, is it a cost of living increase with per diems or is it limiting per diems or whatnot. So again, that is for future work, but I think this gives a broader approach where we can look at all of those options. So, and again, when that happens, who knows, but it could be next term, it could be many terms from now. It's just, this at least gives the option, and so I'm happy to support this.
Great. Councillor Ma, do you have anything you'd like to add to close?
Basically, in closing, I just want to thank councillors and mayor for their feedback on this. I really think it just kind of highlights how we as a council really do care about the sustainability of a strong functioning leadership for this community as we move forward down future councils. And I think this is a measured, smart approach to understanding how we can do better. So thank you.
Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we will now move on to item H2, Palliser Lands Development Feasibility Study. Ms. Smithers, welcome to council.
Thank you, I'm here all day.
Give you a moment to get set up there.
I actually don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I just I can put the recommendation up on the screen if that would help, or it's
Great.
also in
That'd
your
be great,
packages.
thank you.
Okay, so this will be a pretty quick presentation. As you'll recall, at the last Committee of the Whole, we had our project team from Ground Cubed here to present on the Mustache Lands and our the process for the feasibility study, which is the current phase that we are in. And then when I introduced that team at the Committee of the Whole, I acknowledged that the town had been successful in securing a grant from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Affordable Housing Program in the amount of $189,980. So I'm here today to look for approval from council to create a capital project to support the feasibility study for the Mustache Lands. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Cheryl. I forgot to plug it in. I love that photo, which makes me kind of sad about one of the things in the next item. But anyways, so we are here today with a proposal for a new capital project that's CAP 7389 in the total amount of $237,485 for a feasibility study for the development of the Palliser Mustache Lands, and that's going to be funded in part by that FCM grant that I just spoke of, and then the remainder is the $47,505. What we're recommending is that that be transferred out of the existing Housing Action Plan capital project, which is 7327, and then moved over into this new feasibility study project. We had considered just adding the grant amount to the Housing Action Plan, but because it's a big enough project, we wanted to have a separate, discrete project for it. So that is why I'm here today, and the recommendations on the screen, thanks to the clerk, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councillor Faber, you have a question.
I do. Thank you, Ms. Smithers. It talks about the potential to include childcare spaces or services as part of that the commercial area. Would there be also space to potentially include other service delivery models that might be out there that we haven't found yet for services that might benefit the community? An example that I can think of is a community in BC's West Coast that is establishing a doctor's clinic. And I just wanted to, because I know we talk about childcare spaces, and I just wanted to ask if it's potential for that to be a broader scope, not intending to identify anything specific, but maybe there might be, other than childcare services, potential there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, the childcare services is an example. Really, the intent is we want to make sure that it is a complete community, right? So it's about getting residential into the area first and foremost, but then also the livability for the residents in that area. So what supports and community services do we need to really enable people to be somewhat self-sufficient within the Palliser neighborhood? That was a longer yes.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I move that council approve new capital project 7389 for $237,485 for a feasibility study for the development of the Palliser Mustache lands, to be funded by a transfer of $47,505 from CAP 7327 Housing Action Plan, and by grant funding of $189,980 from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM's Sustainable Affordable Housing Program. Speaking to the motion, I'm very excited about this work getting done. As we had discussed at our Committee of the Whole meeting, this is a wonderful step forward on a piece of land that's going to have a significant impact on housing in our community. And I am appreciative of the work that's been done to date, as well as the grant funding from FCM that is making this work be able to happen right now. So, with that, I will ask if anyone else would like to speak to the motion. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am enthusiastically in support of this motion, and I am grateful to the leadership of this council when it comes to addressing housing in our community, and I'm grateful to the leadership of administration, as well as the Ground Cubed and the work they've done, the partners who have stepped up in our community of the Bow Valley, FCM for grant funding, and the provincial government for the land. And to me, what really stands out about moving forward from this point forward is that there's real momentum here on this project, and this feasibility study and this project is going to establish a community in Palliser. There is community there now, but it's going to establish it in a really fundamental way and an innovative way. And I don't even know what it looks like, but I know that from all the work that has led up to this moment, that we are on the right track to house our community, to address livability and affordability issues, to keep climate change and sustainability and active transportation top of our mind, and build relationships. So I'm really grateful to be here in this moment and to have been part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mera.
I too look forward to supporting this motion. I hope everyone else does too. We've worked hard on getting this moving forward. I'm also thankful that we're getting some grant funding towards this, and it's going to be exciting. I know we already had a presentation at Committee of the Whole, and sort of looking forward to all the ideas that are coming out of that. And so I look forward to the study. So I hope everyone supports this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship, and very pleased to support this. Great job, administration, on getting this grant. $189,000 is a lot of money. We got to break ground by 2026, and I feel this project's getting some great momentum. This is one of those pieces, and I just keep hope we got those tailwinds behind us. So thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no one else, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, looking what's left on the agenda, I'm thinking we have a chance of finishing by lunch. Does anybody need a quick break right now? Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break and come back at 11, or 6-minute break, come back at 11:30. there's Sally. So let's get going. Let me know. Okay, we are back from our short break, and we'll move into our last section of the agenda, starting with H3, 2025 Engineering Design and Construction Guidelines. Mr. Kinsey, welcome to council.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Kinsey. I'm the municipal engineer with the town, and I'm here this morning to present to you on the 2025 update to the Engineering, Design, and Construction Guidelines. So I just want to start with a bit of an overview on what the guidelines are. So starting with the applicability of the EDCG. So the EDCG is a document which provides design guidelines and specifications for municipal infrastructure. So this might be infrastructure that's built through town-led capital projects, or it could also be infrastructure that's built by developers through subdivision or development permit requirements. In some cases, it also touches on infrastructure on private land that remains privately held. This could be things like utilities, water and sewer, or on-site grading, and things that, if done incorrectly, could have adverse impacts on municipal infrastructure. The other case where we might regulate private infrastructure is things that are touched on in the land use bylaw. So an example I could give would be the land use bylaw regulates the amount of parking for bicycles and vehicles. The EDCG in turn specifies the width of those parking stalls. There's a hierarchy in terms of the different types of regulations and guidelines. So at the very top, of course, we have provincial regs and guidelines that cover things like wastewater collection and treatment, water distribution. We also, as a town, we do generally defer to the City of Calgary for their guidelines and specifications. They're very robust, very well developed. And where the EDCG fits into this framework is those cases that are unique or special to Canmore. So places where the City of Calgary guidelines don't address unique situations here in town, or where we do things slightly differently. So some examples might be how we manage transportation here in Canmore, also how we manage stormwater. The Valley Bottom, we have a unique stormwater management system, and also we have high ground water, which provides specific uniques and challenges that we don't see in many other communities. So that's why we have the EDCG to kind of provide supplemental information to those other guidelines. The documents that we use when we're preparing the EDCG as inputs that help inform our design guidelines are things like municipal statutory documents. So we look to the Municipal Development Plan, which provides kind of the broad community goals. We also look to the Land Use Bylaw and to some extent area structure plans. We also refer to municipal bylaws. So the water and sewerage bylaws would be a good example of bylaws which provide very strict regulations for particular aspects of that infrastructure, as well as traffic and road use bylaw. Lastly, municipal guiding documents. We look to council-approved documents such as the Integrated Parking Management Plan, the Integrated Transportation Plan, and the Utilities Master Plan. These are all documents that have very important information that has been vetted by council, which we refer to in the EDCG so that we can ensure that our infrastructure is reflecting the goals of those documents. So why an update in 2025? Well, in 2020, we did a fulsome update to the EDCG. So we've had 5 years of experience with this document. We've had experience both through our own capital projects using it, but also through developer contributed infrastructure. We've also had a fairly dramatic increase in development in town, so we've had a chance to work with our development processes, identify gaps or places where we could make improvements, and so we've brought that into the document as well. Third bullet point, evolution of design guidelines. One example of that would be the Utility Master Plan update. We've revised our design criteria for water collection, water distribution, and for sanitary collection, and that's reflected in the EDCG. Lastly, at the request of BODA, we had a very fulsome review of the use of the words should and shall throughout the document. And the reason this is important is that we want to allow for creativity and flexibility within the design, but we still want to ensure that our community goals are being met. So earlier when I spoke to those kind of higher order guiding documents, we want to allow for some flexibility, but at the same time, we want to ensure that we're getting the products that we're hoping for. So through the use of robust definitions, the words should and shall, and we reviewed the use of those words throughout the document, we're confident that we're providing that flexibility, but that we still have the authority to require things that are done that will meet our goals. Another consideration in the document is around capital cost. So of course, infrastructure is expensive. We want to be cognizant that we're balancing capital cost with two things: level of service, so how the infrastructure functions, whether it's a bike path or a water main, and also how much it costs us, or how challenging or not challenging it is to maintain and operate that infrastructure in the long run. So there's a balance there between how much it costs to build the infrastructure versus our costs to maintain it in the long run. Interest holders that were engaged as part of this process included BODA and their technical review committee. We had internal engagement primarily with Public Works, in particular the Streets and Roads Department and the utilities folks, and also with EPCOR as the operator of our water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. They have good firsthand knowledge of what's working in the field and what might need improvement. As part of the process, town staff conducted some research. We reached out to colleagues at the City of Calgary, Town of Banff, Town of Cochrane, City of Fort Saskatchewan, and the City of Kelowna. In these short interviews, we touched on things like development processes, how they're doing business in their communities, and sometimes we might have had more specific technical questions about how they manage different pieces of infrastructure. So these were very valuable interviews, and certainly appreciative of the time that they've donated to us to do that. Town staff also performed a desktop review of municipal guidelines. So here we were looking for, if there are particular items that we were trying to focus in on, we'd look at how business is being done in other communities. There is a bit of variety across the board, so it's always helpful to look at how things are done elsewhere. So in terms of the engagement timeline, we had a significant engagement process with BODA. We led it off by reaching out to BODA and asking them for what their proposed changes would be to the 2020 document. So we invited them to submit to us the things that they would wish to see in the document. That led off the process. I won't go through all of the items because it is quite extensive. However, suffice it to say, we had a number of iterations of the document and a number of workshops that were held with BODA on specific sections of the document. In all, we received almost 1,000 written comments from BODA and quite a number of proposed edits within the text itself. Of the technical comments, we're estimating that about 80% of those were resolved in the first cut, with 20% of those being discussed in more detail in the workshops. Of that last 20%, we could say the majority of them were addressed. Some of those were deferred to future updates. We agreed to push things down the road to further research and coming back in the future with additional updates. I'd like to thank BODA and the technical committee. Their developers and consultants through the process volunteered a significant number of hours, and certainly our ability to leverage their experience and their expertise has really resulted in a high quality document, and it was really valuable in the process. There are a lot of changes in the document, but I thought I'd touch on just a few key changes which might be of interest to council. So notable changes by section. In the applications and permits section, one of the things we've done is we've eliminated on-site securities. So when we have a development permit, we will no longer be taking securities for private infrastructure that's built on site. This brings us in line with how business is done in other communities. We've also made an improved distinction between the acceptance processes for public infrastructure and private infrastructure. In the previous document, there were some It wasn't abundantly clear at times how those processes intertwined, and we've made we've broken those apart so that the process is very clear. This will lead to a very objective process, and more efficient and streamlined process when we're accepting infrastructure. In terms of water and sanitary, we updated the guidelines to reflect changes in design criteria that were brought through the EUMP. Anecdotally, some of the major changes are, broadly we're seeing a decrease in water consumption in households and a resulting decrease in wastewater generation, and so that's been reflected in the design criteria. We also have incorporated learnings from the City of Medicine Hat, who had a significant legal case about cross-lot servicing, so when water and sanitary services cross one private parcel to another. So we've taken those learnings and incorporated those into the EDCG. We've also added some language around service replacement exemptions, so if people are redeveloping an existing property, there's more certainty and clarity on when they need to replace their water and sanitary services to that property. For transportation, we have a fairly significant rewrite of the section, which brings it into alignment with the Municipal Development Plan and the Integrated Transportation Plan. We've added a section on street lighting and pathway lighting, which provides very clear design guidance for developers so they have a clear understanding of what will be required. And we've also updated and improved the design criteria for active transportation networks. Lastly, in the hazards and local conditions section, we've made a number of revisions to the text regarding undermining. Effectively, this is a provincial process, a provincial regulation, so we've updated the EDCG so that it is in line with the provincial regulations. We've added a section on railway proximity, so when developments are being built next to the railway, there's clear guidance on how we assess the risk associated with those developments. This has been in effect for a few years, but we've brought it into the EDCG so that it's available to everyone. And lastly, we've enhanced design guidance for steep creek mitigations in the EDCG. Potential future updates, and I say potential because these are identified, and certainly other things may come up, or we may change this as time goes on. However, one thing I can begin with is the landscaping section. We have not made changes in this version to the landscaping section. Riley Weldon, the parks planner with the town, is currently working on that section and expects to bring that to council in the spring of 2025. So look for that in an upcoming agenda. In terms of stormwater, we made some changes. However, we have a capital project upcoming for a stormwater master plan. We have an outdated document that we wish to update, and we would expect there may be some changes that flow from that document, which would inform Section 6 of the EDCG. For transportation, we are anticipating adding design guidance for near-side traffic signals, such as we see at the Tip 20 intersection. This may be preempted if, on a federal level, if the Transportation Association of Canada develops guidance, we may defer to that. However, in the absence of that, we would consider adding that into the EDCG. For hazards and local conditions, we also have a capital project for evaluating groundwater levels in the valley bottom and updating those in the EDCG. Also, the province in September of last year adopted new flood mapping for the Bow River. We also have a capital project coming up which would evaluate those updated elevations and how we incorporate those into the EDCG. So look for an update on that as well. In terms of water networks, we are continuing to evaluate our processes for requiring water meters in new developments and specifications for pressure reducing valves. For sanitary, we're at the request of BODA, we will continue to look at design specifications for wastewater lift stations. Lastly, with my colleagues in sustainability, there are a number of things which may require updates to the EDCG in the future. One of those, there's currently a construction renovation demolition waste study underway. So we may, once that study is complete, that may result in changes to the EDCG. Caitlin Miller is also about to award an RFP for a review of municipal documents in regards to Fire Smart. This might also result in changes to the EDCG. Electric vehicle charging, my understanding is that may come in a future land use bylaw update. So if that does, there might be associated changes in terms of signage, parking widths for EV charging stalls. And lastly, one other thing we may look at in the future is embodied carbon in construction materials. So, you know, a good example would be the type of insulation we use to insulate pipes underground. Some have a higher GHG profile than others. So those are the sorts of things we may look at in the future. So that's a fair bit of information. I'll open the floor to questions.
That's very much appreciated, Mr. Kinsey. Thank you for that presentation and presenting this update. And I really appreciate the thorough process that's been undertaken. Now, it was a big process and lots of changes. The whole document was overhauled. I recall reading in the BODA letter perhaps a suggestion of smaller, more frequent updates. What are your thoughts around that? Is that, I mean, there has to also be reasonable. Like, I don't know if it's an annual, but maybe it's every couple of years or whatever. What are your thoughts around maybe smaller, more frequent updates?
Yes, Mayor Carter, appreciate that question. Certainly that we have discussed that with BODA. As you appreciate in this slide, there are a number of things. So as much as we may identify particular sections for an update, section by section, because there are quite a few things here, we may at the same time double up and come with a couple of sections at a time. However, yes, that is, I do expect that we'll have that sort of process where we'll identify sections by year and resource the projects to undertake those updates and then come to council perhaps once a year with 1 or 2 or 3 sections each time.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I see an analogy, although they have different statutory requirements, but with the land use bylaw updates. At some point, you rewrite the whole thing, but other times, as we're seeing, there's like these omnibus, you know, just updates over time. So a list is kept over time that, oh yeah, we'll need to do that, and then you bring it to council and update it. So anyway, so certainly open to that. So thank you. Looking to council to see if there are any other questions. Well, I'll ask one more then. The should versus shall, just for my clarity, is should then where there's some variation possible. It should be this, but if there's good reason, you know, it could be something else. Whereas a shall is, no, it's got to be this, and there's really no variation. Is that the difference between the should and shall for the purposes of the document?
That is correct. The shall is very much stems from things like safety codes, regulations that are, you know, they're very much set in stone.
Yeah.
In the cases of shall, there might be cases where it's not possible.
Yeah.
However, that would require a very robust explanation by a professional and a document that's signed and sealed by a professional. In the case of the shoulds, really the goal here is to communicate to the development community that this is a requirement. However, we understand you may have more creative solutions to accomplish the same goals. So should they wish to propose something other than what's stipulated through a should clause, we also require some substantiation in their design narrative on how they're meeting the goals of those guiding documents, even though they're not adhering strictly to the should clause in the EDCG.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, well, I think that there's no other questions. Appreciate that, and I'm going to then move that council approve the 2025 Engineering Design and Construction Guidelines. Anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, before moving to the last agenda item, Mr. Sardi, I was correct that the last time you spoke was the last time you spoke to council. But this is the last time that you actually are here in council as the manager of engineering. And it is with some sadness that I heard of your resignation, but I'm also happy for you that you're moving on to the next chapter of your career. And I just wanted to say on behalf of council how your work has been very much appreciated. As I think of you, I think of above and beyond. And yes, you bring the professionalism and dignity and an optimism that we would hope that many of us would embody. But beyond that, one thing that's impressed me sitting on council and as mayor is the vision that you bring in your recommendations to council. Ultimately, it's council's choice. But I think of complete streets. I think of transportation mode shift in order to have our roads work for a lot longer life than they would if we were just building everything solely for one particular mode of transportation. I also think of you with your quiet, calm approach. It's very helpful whether it's dealing with residents, dealing with industry, or dealing with council. It's very much appreciated. And your dogged persistence, I think, in terms of steep creek mitigations and the resolve that you had from standing on the banks in 2013 looking at Cougar Creek that's now resulted in a project, once again, adopted by administration at council's direction, but reaching out to experts around the world for the best advice that we could possibly get at a very quick interval of time following that disaster. And now we have a project in place that protects thousands of lives and hundreds of businesses and literally billions of dollars of property, way more than it was before. And so appreciate that. I also recognize that at times you have been unfairly and inappropriately targeted for just doing your job and taking it on the chin for council decisions. And that was not fair, and yet you maintained your professionalism and you stood tall, and I know it leaves its marks. It can't help but leave its marks, but you really persevered and kept on going. I really appreciate that. So thank you for your service, and wishing you well for your next endeavors. I know you're still at the job until the end of the month, and I would ask my council and admin to join with me in a round of applause.
Thank you very much for the kind words. I think if you get into transportation in general, you expect to have a target on your back. It's not unique to Canmore, so certainly comes with the territory. I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure working here for the last 13 years. We have such a talented, dedicated, and committed administration. It's always been remarkable to me. People bring different perspectives to the table, and sometimes that creates friction, but ultimately everybody has the community's best interest at heart. There's not too many places you go where you're going to work in an environment like that, so hugely appreciated that. That same sentiment's extended to 3 councils that I've worked with. I've appreciated council's vision, your leadership, unwavering support at times where if I was in your shoes, I would have had a hard time getting behind. So certainly hugely appreciated that, all of that. I think I'm proud of everything we've accomplished collectively over these past years, and I feel like we're in a good place for what comes next and our future challenges. For me, I'm excited for what's next. I'm staying in the Bow Valley. There's no better place to raise a family, in my opinion. And I'm also very excited to see what's next for the organization and to follow the work that council leads and administration leads. With your leadership, we'll undoubtedly be able to continue to tackle the challenges that we face as a community
And lastly, I just want to say thank you all.
Thank you very much. We do have one more agenda item, and so we're going to now move to item H4, boom lift replacement and cap sheet 7351 scope change. Ms. Bernard, welcome to council.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the welcome. I think it is still morning, afternoon by minutes perhaps, so good afternoon, good morning, Mr. Mayor and Council. As presented, my name is Amy Bernard, and I'm here to discuss with you a scope change request for Capital Project 7351. Okay, so Capital Project 7351 was to replace the Genie boom lift that we have on hand. It is a Genie Z34. It is a 19-year-old piece of equipment and was purchased by the town in 2012 in preparation for Elevation Place opening. The machine offers access to 40 feet elevation and is primarily used to do high work within Elevation Place. However, it is also used around town for other town facilities. It is used to support projects such as lighting maintenance, high elevation cleaning, sprinkler system inspections, window cleaning and replacements, painting, anything you can think of that's at high elevation. The town also permits our contractors to use the machine, which aids in reducing service costs. While operating this machine over the past dozen years, the facilities team has determined that while it is a strong machine, it does have its shortcomings. So, the Genie is unable to reach the maximum height of several areas within town facilities, primarily within Elevation Place, including most of the aquatic center, also over both of the pool basins, or all three of the pool basins. The slide area, it's difficult to get the existing Genie in that area, as well as portions of the climbing gym, all portions of the climbing gym, and portions of the atrium area of Elevation Place. The ceiling heights in these areas are up to 54 feet in height, and this has resulted in an inability to complete some of our regular maintenance tasks. For example, if you were to conduct a visit to Elevation Place to the climbing gym, you would notice that there's some burnt out lights, and they have been that way for quite a while now. Through our research to find a replacement lift that offers greater height access, 3 factors have continuously impeded us, that being cost, width, and weight. For example, to attain a lift with a greater height range, it typically gains stability either in a greater weight or with a larger, wider footprint. Most facilities are not built with this in consideration, including Elevation Place, and there is no lift currently on the market that is optimally suited for all of our facilities. So what we're currently working for those who may not be aware, this is a picture of our Genie lift. It is at the near maximum weight that we are allowed to have on the pool slab surface, and that's because it's a suspended slab. If we were to go any higher, we would have to insert a jack system in the basement, which is costly and time consuming to do so. So this weighs approximately almost 12,000 pounds. This machine is also considered narrow by industry standards. It's only about 1.5 meters wide, and it only provides moderate access, as mentioned, 40 feet. And that 40 feet, so the name of this Genie is Z34. That is the elevation platform, and then this 40 feet is considering if you have a 6-foot worker. Not many are. So this is called an articulated spider lift. It took us a while to find this type of machine. During the 2024 pool shutdown, the facilities team rented the spider lift with a higher reach to support the necessary maintenance. It was a good opportunity to determine whether this was a better piece of equipment and if it met our needs. The results were positive in that this lift is lighter, narrower, and has more articulation. However, there are some notable disadvantages. You can see, you actually can't see the 4th leg, but you can see that there are presumably 4 legs on this machine that have to come down to stabilize it. when they are in place, approximately the square footage or the surface footage that is occupied is about 3.5 meters by 3.5 meters in comparison to just that 1.5 meter of the genie. So because of this, we did determine that we couldn't use it in all locations in Elevation Place. Primarily, if you're a swimmer, you'll know that you can probably hear the train come and go along the north side of the pool. That is our most limited area in the pool area, and this machine would not be able to safely put down its outriggers. So we have located a used electric spider lift that is available for purchase that meets many of our requirements. It will provide access to over 60 feet, and it is within our weight tolerance. These machines are only about half the weight of the existing genie. It'll also help us in other facilities. However, again, it will not meet all of our needs. So we are proposing to retain and refurbish the genie instead of replacing it as originally proposed. As mentioned, purchase a used spider lift and keep and service the genie. However, we also have several options for you to consider. One of them would be to purchase a used spider lift and dispose of the genie. Administration would then rent an aerial lift, such as the genie, for approximately 6 weeks throughout the year, as necessary to use in areas that this machine, the genie, would not be able to use. The spider would not be able to access. The second option would be to keep the genie and complete a full mechanical overhaul to extend its useful life. In this scenario, administration would then rent a taller machine, such as the spider, for access to areas that is required, but this comes at a significant cost. When we rented this during the aquatic shutdown, it came at over $6,000 a week to rent it, and it took months for us to procure it and to line it up. And when we do these things like the annual shutdown at the pool, we don't often have flexibility once those dates are released to the public. Therefore, I come to my recommendation. It is to ask you perhaps to consider what Andy would do and to approve the revised capital project 7351 scope sheet to allow for the purchase of a newer spider lift and retain the existing lift, utilizing any remaining funds towards refurbishment of the existing unit to extend its serviceable lifespan. And at this time, I ask if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bernard. I see what you're doing there, trying to ride some very positive coattails to a successful conclusion on this recommendation. I'm looking to council to see if there are questions. Ms. Smithers, did you have a comment first?
Thank you, and thanks to Ms. Bernard for her presentation. I was just thinking as we were going through that, during the Finance Committee deliberations and the capital discussion, there were a couple of questions about how often administration looks to purchase used equipment or repurpose existing. And I think this is a really good example of the genie that we have now. We bought used. It was about 7 years old when we bought it for Elevation Place. And once again, even with this newer lift, again, we're looking at, it's new to us. So just wanted to flag that for council, that it is just part of our practice when we're looking at acquiring equipment. If there's used stuff that meets our needs, we're more than willing to go there.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Bernard. I just had a question. The spider lift, if that was part of our inventory of machines that we have, do we then allow others to rent that from us and make money off of that?
So we don't currently do that with our machines. If a contractor is using it, they're using it for municipal work. However, we have reached out to the municipality of Banff, and without them knowing the details of what we're going to be procuring, they were very interested in this spider lift. They don't currently have something for themselves like this.
It struck me that there was a potential to perhaps, if these types of machines aren't readily available, see some revenue as
Absolutely.
well. I know, and I know, like, when I've gone through that master fee schedule, which is so long, I see lots of different things, and wasn't sure if I'd ever seen the boom lift there. So
I don't believe it's on the master fee list.
no. So,
Yeah.
but
Presuming that it could be, and that was a thought of ours that we could add this.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship, and great presentation, Ms. Bernard.
Thank you.
If we get the spider lift and we refurb the existing Genie to extend its serviceable lifespan, is there like a realistic amount, like how many more years do we think we can get out of that Genie?
That is a good question. I don't know if we've determined how long. So one thing to consider, we store that Genie outside.
Yeah.
And so that has an effect on its lifespan. However, our servicers in Calgary have said that it is in good condition. And they thought, I think a number of 5 years was not unexpected.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank
And
you.
we don't use it as heavily as other industries may, construction, for example.
Right, and then maybe with the spider lift coming, it might even reduce some of the loads for some of the jobs that the Genie would do.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. More of a comment. I really appreciated the visuals in this one, and you know, in capital projects in the past, I've been like, what is that piece of equipment, and why does it cost this amount of money? To have a visual for me was really helpful to see and understand what it is you're looking for. Much appreciated.
Thank you for the feedback. We can offer rides if we do get this, if that's of interest.
I'm 6'2". We can get that 40 foot and 2 inch on the boom. Oh yeah, Ben. Yeah, there you go. All right then, I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will move the council approve a scope change for CAP 7351 boom lift replacement. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that we adjourn. All in favor? Carried unanimously.